Hey y'all, welcome back to another Lenormand reading, this time for Christine Chan, or Chris Chan. I've been watching Gino Samuel's documentary, A Comprehensive History now, for a while, a couple of months. This has been a really fascinating documentary, but I want to take a deeper look into Christine Chan's astrological natal, or their astrological natal chart, as well as a Lenormand reading, in order to kind of figure out what she can do in order to have the best life possible. If you've watched the documentary, if you follow Christine's life, you know that she's been through a whole lot. And we're actually going to get through that today with a breakdown of her astrological natal chart. Now, how do astrological natal charts work? Keep in mind that you're listening to a beginner, right? And by the way, everything in this video is allegedly for entertainment purposes, learning purposes only, for my learning purposes. But astrological natal charts kind of help you figure out where your strengths throughout your lifetime are, what your weaknesses, again, throughout your lifetime are, and possibly it predicts, in some cases, what's going to happen to an individual, right? What kind of love life they're going to have, what kind of career they're going to have. Unfortunately, a lot of what Christine has gone through is in her astrological natal chart. So let me actually get some notes going. So in order to draw up her astrological chart, I used astroseek.com. I need you to once again keep in mind that I am literally learning how to read tarot, read Lenormand, and read astrological natal charts. So let us get into some of the highlights. I found Christine's exact birth dates, time, and place, and that is what gave me this particular chart. Some of it is dependent on her life circumstances, like her autism, for instance. Some of this astrological chart is going to be tailored to what's going on mentally. So yeah, let's take a look at just generally overall Christine's Chiron, which is spelled Chiron, her Chiron. This is the wound that an individual is born with, that ostensibly they can never heal. Now, they can do everything they can. People should do everything they can. And by the way, everyone has a Chiron. People should do everything they can in order to work with that Chiron and make other people's lives better on top of their own lives, right? But everyone has a Chiron, and hers really specifically said that she would have, at the time of her birth, her planets and stars predicted, Chiron predicted, that she would have bad parents, that she would have people abusing her for no reason, that she would have the inability to finish artistic projects, and an inability to find a healthy romantic connection. That is all in her Chiron. And when I looked at her astrological chart, I saw that Chiron was a pretty oversized, outsized influence in her life. We'll get more into the run-ins with the law, because interestingly enough, run-ins with the law also appear in Christine's astrological natal chart. So let's get into some of her other planets. In her first house, she has Aquarius rising. Aquarius is an air sign, kind of like my Gemini sign, right? So this is about language. Air is going to have something to do with language, with communication, with thoughts. And in this case, this points to Christine doing what she can to avoid attention, but nonetheless it gravitates toward her anyway. So Aquarius ascendant in the first house, she might try to get away from attention from trolls, she would say. Unfortunately, this planet says that she cannot. Also, in her first house is Sun in Pisces, and this is her, if you were to go on like Cosmopolitan, like go into like Cosmo magazine or something like that, you would look up your sun sign. So this is her sun sign, Pisces. That's the two fish. That's a water sign. This indicates that she was likely too shy as a kid to communicate well with the other kids around her. The autism, I put down in my notes, the autism absolutely didn't help back then. We didn't know that much about how to really work with autistic folks back then. And I'd argue that we're still learning how to do that today, and we're not doing a great job of it. But back then, they really didn't know anything about how to help autistic people live a good life, right? Unfortunately, Christine missed out on this. Not only does Sun in Pisces in the first house indicate that she was probably too shy as a kid to communicate with other kids, but she was also super dependent on her home environment. She has and had a lot of an imagination and has an ability to empathize with others to a degree. We can take a look at her apology videos for saying things against some members of the LGBT community. We can see parts of her are able to empathize with the hurt that she's caused, right? That is an ability that she has because of her Sun in Pisces. Now, I do say to a degree, and that's going to tie back to Christine's bad parenting, right? The parenting that she grew up with was not ideal. And you can take a look at Geno Samuel's documentary, and you can see how unbeneficial Christine's parents are to her, I should say. Mom's still alive. Sun in Pisces also indicates that Christine has an ability to manipulate and to defraud and deceive for personal selfish gain. What's interesting is that her chart says that the world will tend to work against those attempts at fraud and deception. So what can she do to live the best life with these? We have seen examples where Christine has not acted in the best way possible, right? In terms of manipulation, in terms of defrauding. At some points, this has been a difficulty. What can she do but be aware of what's going on and work against her tendencies, right? And I should say that from what I've studied so far, all sun signs have upsides and downsides to them, and it's up to us to work against those downsides and to really augment the upsides. So I also want to take a look at her moon in Pisces in her first house. By the way, she had quite a few planets in her first house. There's a lot loaded in there. So this points to an inability to finish a project, even though she has plenty of plans to do so. It also points to lots of changing emotions, and it also it indicates that she's easily influenced by others' opinions. Not just by others' opinions, but also by others themselves, the individuals themselves. So she's got both her sun and moon in Pisces. So this is a very watery individual. What she can do to have the best possible life is to be a little bit careful of the wishy-washy. What popped into my head just then, it may be a bit harsh, but the wishy-washy has been a problem. Again, if you take a look at her life so far, right? That doesn't mean that she can't change. We'll get into that in just a second. So what else does she have going on in her natal chart? She has Venus in Capricorn in the 12th house, which indicates that at points Christine has been able to keep some of her internet romantic connections a secret. But her Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house points to individuals who go out of their way to hurt her. And these individuals have surfaced in many of Christine's love sagas, right? If you take a look again at Geno Samuel's documentary, you can see how it's just one supposed romantic connection after another that are all there to hurt her, right? And I'm not saying that she isn't responsible for what she does. I'm not saying that some of her views aren't problematic. They are, right? We're going to get into that a little bit more. This is indicating that she can do something to affect that. Venus's placement in Christine's chart also indicates a persistent disappointment in romantic pursuits. So I don't know. I want Christine to find happiness in her romantic life. I do. This is why I'm doing her natal chart. There's some important information that once I saw her birth date, I looked at her birth chart. There are some serious traps ahead of her that, I don't know. I felt like putting a warning out there. We're going to get into that. So a persistent disappointment in romantic pursuits. Chiron has a lot to do with this. Let's get more into Chiron in the 3rd house, in Taurus. When you think Taurus, that's the sign of the cow, the bull, right? And it just kind of sits there. It's an earth sign, so it's a whole lot more difficult to move around, to change, right? It's not as adaptable to change. Chiron in the 3rd house in Taurus indicates that she will always be regarded as an adult child. Her past behavior has not helped this planet's, the stars' influence. Additionally, certain situations could cause Christine to lose family property that had been in the family for generations. Chiron in Taurus says that Christine will never have a private life, and that this ultra well-documented life that she has now was meant to be. At the time that she was born, Chiron in the 3rd house said, this particular child is always going to be in the public eye. She's going to try to escape, but she never will. It was fated to be, right? Now again, she can still do stuff to change this. If she cuts off the internet, if she cuts herself off from the internet, she can do this if she wants. But keep in mind that the Pisces, the sun and the moon in the Pisces, that's not going to lend itself to necessarily to strength. She's going to have that kind of willpower. Let's talk a little bit more about Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house. Not only does she have this, not only does she not have a private life, Chiron says that no matter how much Christine tries to explain herself, almost no one can or wants to understand her. Chiron says that she will be aware of the fact that no one can or wants to understand her, and that will cause a tremendous amount of hurt. So again, Chiron has a massive influence in Christine's life. Therapy is what popped into my head. I really, really wish. I don't know that she has access to good therapy. I wish that she did if she doesn't. I want to talk about her romantic relationships because that's really a big reason for why I pulled up this birth chart to begin with and why I'm talking about it here. This is where the warning kicks in. Mars in Libra in the 8th house points to Christine not being very social, finding it difficult to do anything without someone giving her permission to do it, and the issue of being dominated by anyone she wants to have a sexual relationship with. And I didn't say this before, but I'll say this now. Sex and sexual stuff pops up throughout Christine's entire chart, right? So it was in Mars and it was in a couple of other planets too. But if someone wonders why sex and sexual contact is so important to Christine, it's because it's in her birth chart. It is all over her birth chart. In fact, a couple of planets talk about her sexuality. But she is going to have this issue of being dominated by anyone she wants to have a sexual relationship with. Mars in this chart says that it is possible that a sexual or romantic partner may take advantage of Christine's autism and planetary placements to steal some family or money property, right? Some financial property. And they may do it through marriage, right? We've already seen examples of trolls being brave enough to have pretend but still out in public dates with Christine. I see this going even further, and I pray to my guiding spirit that this doesn't happen. I hope that Christine's guiding spirit protects her from this particular individual, because I'm not done with Mars and Libra. It is possible that Christine's future spouse may be irritable, energetic, and even aggressive. Also, Christine's entire natal chart points to a high libido, and I've already talked about this a little bit. Mars and Libra in the 8th house points to Christine both valuing and yet losing family property, such as her dad's record collection. If you take a look at the documentary, at several points, Christine and her mom are selling her dad's, who passed away, her late dad's collections in order to get money, right? So she valued it on the one hand, because she does talk about it in the videos that she makes. On the other hand, it's something that they can use for money, right? And Mars and Libra in the 8th house at the time of Christine's birth predicted that this would happen. I need to, this is also a good time for me to say that because of the bad parenting, because of the choices that Christine has made up to this point, many of the positive aspects of her natal chart that could have genuinely been positive have been turned into negatives. That doesn't mean that she can't turn those negatives back into positives and be an incredible story, an incredible role model, if she does. I think that she would need an incredible person to help her do that, right? A kind spouse, for instance, or, I don't know, a kind friend. I don't know. There is a way to turn these negatives back into positives if she wants. I want to talk about her Saturn in Libra in the 8th house. And if you've noticed that we've got a bunch of planets piled up into just a few houses, if you take a look at her astrological natal chart, all of her stuff is pushed onto one edge of this circle. So it's actually kind of interesting how I get this idea of being extremely one-sided. That may not be accurate, but that is what pops into my head when I look at all these lines crisscrossing her chart, but only on one section of this massive circle, right? So Saturn in Libra in the 8th house points to justice being an omnipresent influence in Christine's life, especially when her sun in Pisces in the 1st house tempts her towards defrauding and deceiving. So this is where the world says, no, you're going to be honest, and if you want to try to deceive, there are going to be some consequences for that. Also, Christine's North Node in Cancer asks her to beware of a reliance on recognition from external sources over developing inner peace. So basically, stop looking for approval from folks outside of yourself, right? Get approval from your inner child That is the way for her to enter peace. It also, or Christine's North Node in Cancer also asks her to be aware of being unreliable, from isolating herself from the world, as well as trying to escape it. And this is where Chiron and her other planetary placements make this really difficult. At points, she has tried to get away from the internet, to get away from the trolls, and it's something that, that she keeps coming back to. She should not be escaping. She should not be isolating. On the other hand, Chiron is going to be really pushing her to isolate herself. There are a variety of influences that help explain some of Christine's negative behavior. However, she can still choose to behave differently. And this is actually something not just for Christine, but for everyone with an astrological natal chart. Planets and stars can only tempt or create a ripe situation. They cannot force us to act badly. In all these aspects that I discussed, there are positive behaviors that Christine could have adopted. So this is the point that I take a look at a couple of spreads for Christine. So I have my 7th sphere Lenormand cards here. Let me get lined up with the camera. We're going to take a look at a couple of questions that I have for what Christine can do in order to make the most out of the lifetime that she's in. And actually, that's my first question, is what was Christine meant to do in this lifetime? So tell you what, 7 card, or 9 card spread. I'm getting a message from my guiding spirit to do a 9 card Lenormand spread, which in another way to call it, I should say, is the portrait spread. It's been called the portrait spread before. Spirit, would you like me to keep shuffling? Spirit says to lay them out. So how would you like me to lay them out, Spirit? Top row first. Got it. Here we go. So I get the 7th sphere Lenormand from labyrinthos.com. I will put a link down in the description below. Spirit is telling me, oh, that is 2 cards. Bottom one. Yep. I am listening to Spirit's signals as I'm laying out cards. Sometimes I'm meant to do 1 layout, and then we'll take a look at other layouts, depending on the situation. Okay. So, what is Christine meant to do in this lifetime? Let's take a look. Revolution. Opening up to something new, or opening up to a revelation, quite possibly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It lands on the house of the tree. Something that popped up in Christine's natal chart is that she is a deeply spiritual individual. And something else that pops up in her chart is that she is psychic, that she is actually pretty decently psychic too. Tree sometimes has connections to do with spirituality. What was she meant to do in this lifetime but open up to something spiritual? Okay, and I should say that I am a beginner to Lenormand, that I am using this as a learning tool, and that everyone's going to have different interpretations of what they see. Let's take a look at her first row. So this top row is what she consciously wants out of life. And unfortunately, I see some confusion. She's confused about what she really, really wants. What are her wishes, hopes, and dreams? What does she aspire to? Unfortunately, it's tied to the fox, which in this context isn't positive. It has to do with selfishness. When we talk about deceiving and defrauding for personal gain, this is what this is talking about. This is what she consciously wants. Now, what's her present reality? Let's talk about that. Public, opening up to a public burden. Well, unfortunately, that has been her present reality since she appeared on Something Awful all those years ago. This is a very public burden. The public can see that this is a burden on her, and some individuals are going to get a kick out of that. She was meant to open up to the spiritual realm in this lifetime, but unfortunately her reality indicates that there's a tremendous burden here. Let's take a look at what's moving the situation underneath it all. Finances with the fish, something valuable. Let me ask Spirit about this lily, because this could be about age, retirement, being established, or this could mean sex. So I am getting an indication from Spirit that this is the sexual lily, right? So something valuable, sexual, a journey. So I think that this will tell you that this is the journey, the search for a boyfriend-free girl whom she can spend the rest of her life with. That's what's moving the situation unconsciously. She may be aware of what's going on underneath. On the other hand, since it's appearing on the lower level, I don't know how deeply she's thinking towards this level, right? With therapy, it's possible that she could. So we're continuing to answer this question of what is she meant to do in this lifetime? So here we're talking about her past. In the past, she had some wishes, hopes, and dreams for public recognition at points, and this does appear in her astrological chart. She is interested in being a mentor to people that she perceives as being in need of mentoring. Interesting. No, like she had some dreams about being out there in the public eye in a positive way. And you can actually see this in her introductory video at the very beginning of Gino Samuel's documentary. She wanted to be a mentor. This was deeply valuable to her. Wishes, hopes, and dreams dashed is the word that came to mind just now. What's her present reality? This particular column right here. She's opening herself up to sexual confusion. Her present reality is that she is opening herself up to sexual confusion. And the clouds, they can be burned away by the sun. But I don't see the sun here. This is her future. What is she going on? A selfish burden. This reminds me of a burden that she could let go of at any point, but she doesn't want to. This is her cross to bear, if you will. This is her journey. To learn how to deal with selfishness over and choose to be generous, right? And being generous, you don't have to be generous with just your money, although the context, the influences do indicate that she could conquer a lot of this selfishness by doing good deeds with her money, with her time, right? Fish isn't just about finances. It's about what we find valuable. Time is valuable, for instance. She doesn't have to just give money, right? She can volunteer time as well to work with what she tends toward. This is in her future, and it tells me that it's going to continue to weigh down on her. 10 of Wands, even though I'm not doing tarot with this particular reading, 10 of Wands popped into my head just now. So, folks, pretty much everything, at this point, I'd just be repeating information if I were to do an even deeper reading on this 9-card spread. But Christine has a clear choice to make, and it will be difficult. It will be. I'm not saying it won't be, but she can do this. She can do this with a great therapist, with, you know, a really good community that wants to see her succeed and be the best version of herself. So I wanted to know, what was Christine meant to do in this lifetime? This answered that. I also want to know how Christine can navigate her Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house. So I'm getting a 7-card. Whoop! Here we go. Throw them all around. Hold on just a second. I'm going to stop the taping and we'll come back. Okay. So, how can Christine navigate her Chiron in Taurus? More shuffling, Spirit? I got a strong no. So let's lay them out. Do you want the middle first, Spirit? Out to the side. Good stuff. 7 cards. How can Christine navigate her Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Cool. Okay, what can she do to navigate her Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house? And this somehow has to do with a masculine influence. I pulled out the 7th sphere deck, and I hope that you can all see that. Yes, here we go. Straighten up a little bit. Animus is, like, traditionally this would be the man card. On the other hand, this particular deck recognizes that we all have, regardless of our gender identity, whether we are trans or cisgender, we all have mixtures of masculine and feminine within us, right? And it depends on the individual on how much of one influence they have over the other, or maybe they've got a balance of both, right? But what can Christine do to navigate her Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house? Something to do with the masculine influence in the home, because it lands on the house of the house, which is about security, family, environment, that kind of thing. It can literally mean your physical house, but in this case, what's going on with the family, what's going on within the home, a masculine influence. We may need to deal with a masculine influence here with this Chiron in the 3rd house in Taurus. Moon has to do with emotions, what lies beneath, the spiritual, the intuitive. Interesting. She's going to need to reconcile dueling genders. If you're not dueling genders, how can I put this? She's going to need to reconcile both her masculine and feminine aspects. I see right away that those aspects are facing one another, which tells me that there's some confusion. Anima, or I should say, no, I'm sorry, lied. Anima lands on the house of the tree, not clouds. I apologize. Anima lands on the house of the tree, which indicates to me that this is something deeply rooted, right? On the other hand, there's some security in the masculine influences. So Christine is going to need to, I'll bet that she does understand what's going on with these two influences, but it says that she's going to need to have these two identities work together on a spectrum, if you will. They need, well, you know what, the Lover's card. Again, I'm not dealing with tarot in this particular video, but the Lovers is about duality. and about two opposing forces coming together and making something beautiful and new. These two cards are facing one another, which tells me that there needs to be some reconciliation. What I said earlier, they're not facing the same direction, which I think is interesting. So let us get into more of this particular deck. I'm going to do some chains, if you will. So, a reckoning with one's intuition, with their emotions, for instance. What can they do to have, what can they do to work with their Chiron in Taurus in the third house? Well, they can have a reckoning with their spirituality. They can confront what maybe they've kept hidden, right? In tarot, the moon is about stuff that we can't necessarily see, that's being concealed from us. And this moon can have some of the same implications, if you will. So with the Scythe and the Tower, that's a reckoning with isolation. We had discussed her, Christine, being isolated earlier. The Scythe is pointed towards the moon, which lets me know that there is a reckoning coming with her like with her emotions, right? I don't like to use this word very often, but meltdown. Like, she's had multiple instances where she's talked about what's going on camera, and that's not always the best thing to do, right? When you're going through an emotional reckoning, maybe keep it private for a bit, right? And I know that she's gotten this advice before. The Scythe is facing away from, the pointy end is facing away from the Tower, from the isolation. She needs to have a reckoning with how she has separated herself from the world, but I don't know that she will, right? Definitely have this reconciliation between the animus side of herself and the anima side of herself. This has to do with social situations. So she's going to be getting some news, some fast-moving news in a social situation about the feminine side of her. And this is something that she's going to have to deal with constantly. If she's going to deal with her Chiron in Taurus in the third house, she's going to have to deal with social situations and lots of, this is fast-moving gossip is what popped into my head. Fast-moving gossip about who she is as a person. I see these standing behind her. They're behind her back. The woman is not facing into this, which makes me think that she may not be aware of this coming up. I see some deeply emotional news. When you look at the moon and the rider together, that tells me that there's some stuff coming up from the surface that's going to be maybe emotionally upsetting coming here soon. And she's going to need to see that and take it in stride. Again, I'd love to see her get into therapy. I'm sure a lot of us would. This is a reckoning with social situations, and now that I'm talking a little bit more about her Chiron, I come back to the trolls, right? This makes me think that there's going to be more sagas, unfortunately, with the trolls, and I hope that I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong here, but I think that she's going to have an escalation with these social situations, with these trolls, for instance. Social situations can mean in-person, physical socializing, or it can mean internet socializing, either way. And I see Christine being deeply isolated, and we've talked about in Chiron how it's best for her not to be isolated, even though she wants a private life in some respects. This is saying avoid that. Don't isolate yourself in negative ways. Of course, we all need alone time, right? We all need cave time. There's a difference between needing alone having alone time and being isolated, right? This is asking her to avoid that at all costs. But above all, to have a reckoning with the masculine aspects of herself. You know, Mars and Libra in the 8th house is popping up a lot in my head right about now. Mars is going to be the more masculine influence, and this was heavily tied to sex. Christine is going to need to have a reckoning with her, the sexual side of herself in order to work with her Chiron in the 3rd house, right? It will always be there, and there will always be a degree of pain associated with that star, but she can deal with this. She can absolutely deal with this. Cool. I have one more question based on her natal chart. How can Christine avoid real/fake love interests who could take advantage of her and her finances/property? How can she avoid these individuals? So let me pull these back up and we will take a look at that. How can Christine avoid real/fake love interests who could take advantage of her and her finances/property? More shuffling, Spirit? That's a no. Another 7-card spread, right? Let's take it from the left. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You'd think I'd have an issue with counting. Cool. How can Christine avoid real/fake love interests who could take advantage of her and what she has? Well, she needs to pay attention to the messages about her security. Letter lands on the house of, you know what, contract also pops into my head. It is possible that some legal documents, and this is not a replacement for law advice from a legitimate lawyer, but it's possible that letter could be associated with some legal advice, some contracts that would protect Christine. Prenuptial is something that pops into my head. A specific kind of contract that will keep her safe if indeed she really, really wants to marry. So, changes in commitment, obviously, because the whip points to, in this case, abuse. And we were talking earlier how in her natal chart, how this would be something. Their woman pops up again. How she would need to be super, super cautious of a partner who might take advantage of her. I'm going to turn off my light. Let's see if that does anything better for it. And it does. Wonderful. Okay. So, yeah, I use a cheapy old IKEA lamp for when the sun isn't up. And now that the sun is up, we can take a look in a better quality light. So, yes, messages, definitely this is going to be about the messages that she's getting, like, hey, avoid this person. On the other hand, this could be about legal documents, contracts, that kind of thing. So she is going to need, what can she do to avoid this destructive individual? Well, she can change her commitments to a deep conflict, right? Right now, she is in this is a really, it's a cycle, right? The ring is just a loop. And storks, it's a transitional, they're migrating, right? It's a migratory cycle. So, unfortunately, she's going to need to break the cycle of abuse. That's what I am seeing here. The whip in extreme circumstances points to abuse, but that's absolutely what's been going on with Christine, right? She has not gotten the best care possible for her autism and for her unique life circumstances. She has not. has gotten abusive messages that have made life incredibly difficult. And now I think it's interesting that earlier when I accidentally threw my Lenormand cards all over the place, Mountain popped up, and I'm not surprised to see it pop up again here. That is challenges. That is a lot of difficult. No experienced mountaineer would recommend you mountain climbing completely by yourself, especially not the most difficult mountains in the world to climb, right? That's how people get hurt. That's how people pass away, right? How they don't conquer their challenges. So I'm seeing here that it's going to be deeply difficult to break this cycle of abuse, and that it's possible that some legal documents are going to be part of this breaking of a cycle of abuse. Restraining order. I could be wrong, but restraining order pops into my head right about now. Ship pops up again in this particular spread. Am not surprised. Journey a long distance towards a long way from from her destination is what pops into mind here. This is going to be an incredibly long, difficult journey with a woman. Now, I don't know if this is Christine's mom, Barbara, or if this is Christine's future spouse. But since we were talking about what can Christine do to avoid this destructive individual, it's to be aware that you're on a difficult journey to avoiding this destructive individual. Again, I really, really want Christine to get into therapy. What pops into my head just now is the stork and the anima, or the woman together. This is going to repeat a pattern that Christine has already seen with Barbara, I should say, with the way that Barbara has treated Christine. That this cycle is going to repeat itself. That the journey is going to feel like it just repeats itself until Christine learns to break out of what she's been pushed into the box that she's been pushed into. Mountain and Whip together is that's a difficult combination of cards. That's some abuse that is really, really difficult to overcome, if not virtually impossible, at least without serious therapy. And by the way, Lenormand, tarot, astrological birth charts are not replacements for legitimate, great therapy. And I'd love to see Christine get into that. She has some real difficulties getting out of abuse, and I feel like that she's just going to land back into it again. Unless there is some kind of contract, some kind of legal document protecting her from harm. So, folks, that is a really long reading on Christine, or Chris Chan. I really encourage you to watch Gino Samuel's documentary. A lot of work has clearly gone into it. Yeah, I hope that you have a good rest of your day. I wish Christine the best of luck in life, and I wish her an amazing marriage if she ever does want to get married, right? If she ever does get into that. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Take care.